Imagine a world where entire nations, entire peoples, could be handed over without ever asking them. Imagine a continent, vast and rich beyond comprehension, divided not by rivers or mountains, but by ink on paper in a distant European office. This was Africa before it was sold for free. The year was 1884. The place was Berlin, Germany. But the stage for this act of betrayal had been set long before, in the fevered minds of European empires, hungry for land, resources, and power. The Berlin Conference, a meeting that would change the course of history, not by war or conquest in the traditional sense, but by diplomacy, by a cold, calculated reshuffling of an entire continent. And yet, the people whose lands were being parceled out were nowhere in the room. They had no voice, no vote, no power. Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor of Germany, presided over this historic gathering. But make no mistake, this was not Germany's gain alone. France, Britain, Portugal, Belgium, and other European powers all came hungry for their share of the African prize. And what they did was audacious. They agreed, whoever claimed a piece of land first, with a European flag planted and treaties signed, often with local leaders under duress or misunderstanding, would now own it. Africa had been rich in people, culture, and resources for millennia. Gold, ivory, rubber, fertile lands, treasures that fueled the engines of the Industrial Revolution. And yet, none of this mattered to the men in Berlin. They saw only opportunity. They saw a map as a game board, with rivers and mountains as obstacles and human lives as pawns in a grand strategy of empire. The conference itself lasted from November 1884 to February 1885. Over 4 months, no African ruler was consulted. And yet, by the time it ended, the foundations for the scramble for Africa had been laid. Nations were legally legitimized in their conquests. Borders were drawn, often slicing through ethnic groups, destroying kingdoms, and sowing seeds of conflict that would echo for generations. Belgium's King Leopold II, with his eyes on the Congo, would soon transform the region into a personal empire, extracting wealth at unimaginable human cost. France would push into West Africa. Britain would consolidate power from Cairo to Cape Town, and Germany, the new imperial player, would stake its claim along the east coast. It is said that Africa was sold for free. And in many ways, it was. There was no auction, no payment, only the silent acceptance that human lives, cultures, and lands were negotiable commodities. The conference was a symbol, a stark illustration of the arrogance of empire, of a worldview that saw entire societies as tools for profit and prestige. But the story does not end there. The Berlin Conference's shadow stretches into our present. The borders drawn then still exist, sometimes sparking tensions, wars, and struggles for identity. Africa's richness was exploited, its development disrupted, and yet its resilience endures. For every act of theft, every imposed boundary, Africa found ways to survive, to resist, and to reclaim its voice. So, what can we learn from that cold day in Berlin? Perhaps this: history is not just what happens, but who is given the power to decide what happens. And when people are silenced, when their lands are sold without consent, the consequences last far beyond the ink on paper. Africa may have been sold for free, but its story of struggle, of survival, of beauty, and of unyielding spirit is priceless. And it is a story that must never be forgotten. because history is not just a record of the past, it is a warning, a lesson, and a call to remember who we are and what we must never allow to happen again.